Hello, welcome to Season 1, Episode 2 of Emerging Aotearoa. I'm Sam, your host once more. Today, for your listening pleasure, we have Responsibility, a poem written and performed by
Ravi Prasad
of Auckland. The Littlest Hero, a short story by
Bridle, Maddie Holloway
of Katikati. Narrated by
Knicki Blake
of New Plymouth. And to see us out, Journey People Reprise, a song from
Teddy Adams
of Katikati. Celebrating diversity, creativity and collaboration, we hope to create a new resource for emerging artists and diverse voices to have their art experienced. If you want to be involved, we'll have all the details for you after the credits at the end of the show. And now, let us begin.
Responsibility. It's a response to your ability. They say that responsibility is a reward, an opportunity, an accord as we get on this carriage to adulthood where marriage and kids will follow. It's like an episode of Squid Games, survival of the fittest, where we try not to get killed off for making one wrong move. Smooth, like a criminal that strikes at night, not trying to lose our spotlight. We sometimes run through the stoplight, the stop signs telling us to stop. But our pride puts the pedal to the metal, showing off our achievements like the little wins when we finally tick off the task on our to-do list. Responsibility sometimes results in a fist fight with a mirror. Our reflection can reckon more damage than the passive parental issues we deal with. We need to go easy on ourselves. Don't shelve the emotions later that can cause a catastrophe if we let this commotion play out. Locomotives as we ticket our way down the train tracks. At a crossroads that intersect us together, a fork is used to tune a piano, but in a road it causes us to depart from premature actions. Activities that cause us to swallow our inner child. The wild days dawn on us as we can't Groundhog Day our way out of this situation. Can't repeat former glory, can't repeat the same stories. Nows are different. Weird, unusual, as we waltz our way through this wacky world outside our window, warrant our way to see if we're fit enough to be on the road. They don't let minors take to the wheel. We receive a speech about how this navigating the road thing works. It's clockwork. It's clockwork. Aren't you glad that our dreams aren't dashed the moment we graduate, smashed into a million pieces the moment we pass the test and are elevated to a new level? Boss battles will follow. See, this is what happens when we go from dipping our toes in the shallow stream of water and go scuba diving, snorkels and breathing apparatus as we explore the deep blue. See what's on the other side as we go deeper. The higher the mountain, the steeper the view below. Our targets track us on to the next expedition. Adventure of a lifetime, we like ours to be sublime, lemon, lime, and bitters as we breathe in the cool air with ice in our veins as we go for it. In the moment, in the zone, to take on the goalpost before us, with the echoes of the crowd backing us. Breathe. Take it all in before you exhale and enter once again.
The Littlest Hero by Flis Bridle. It was a sunny afternoon during the May school holidays. Ben was nearly 8 that year, and he had been to see the movie High Noon with his brother Michael and Michael's friend Douglas, both of whom were about 10 years old. They came out of the darkened theatre into the softening afternoon sunlight. Michael vocally drumming the beat to the theme song, while Douglas droned the words, "Do not forsake me, oh my darling." Douglas broke off singing to give a stern command. "Synchronize your watches, men," though he knew he was the only one lucky enough to possess a watch. Michael consulted his wrist. 2 years past a freckle, he announced. "What's the time, Dougie?" "Nearly 25 to 4. We've got time. Let's go see Jimmy." Jimmy was a boy from school whose father owned a downtown dairy, only a few yards from the cinema. Ben followed the older boys into the shop. Jimmy was alone behind the counter, filling a large jar with Jaffas he was taking with a metal scoop from a grey carton. He was a thin, pale boy with wide, sad eyes, who was often in trouble for missing school or for being late. He had no friends. Nobody really liked him. "Where's your dad, Jimmy?" demanded Douglas. "He's gone to the bank," answered Jimmy in his soft voice. "Well, how about you give us some bullseyes then? You got to be eating this stuff all the time, I reckon." "I'm not allowed to eat any, and I'm not allowed to give any away." "Oh, why not? You've got plenty." Michael put his hand into his back pocket and drew something out. "I'll swap you. I've got aeroplane cards. You collect those, don't you? Look, I've got a Messerschmitt and a Wellington. You wanted them, didn't you?" Jimmy's sad eyes took on an eager shine as he caught a glimpse of the longed-for pictures. "Come here, have a look," said Michael, moving to a clear space at the far end of the counter, where, with a flourish, he spread out his collection of swaps for Jimmy to see. There were 2 Lancasters. One was a bit dog-eared. He pushed it across the counter. "You can have that one anyway." Douglas glanced about for a moment, fixing a warning scowl on Ben and raising a finger to his lips. Then, with what seemed like practiced stealth and speed, he slid past the counter, quickly took a fistful of Jaffas from the grey box and slipped them into the pocket of his trousers. Another glance around the shop, and another handful of Jaffas was pocketed with scarcely a rattle. Ben felt a curious, cold, prickly feeling as he watched. Then Douglas turned and moved towards Michael. "We'd better go, or we'll miss the bus," he urged. "Yeah, okay. What about it, Jimmy?" demanded Michael. The boy looked miserable as he repeated in his soft whine, "I'm not allowed." With a brisk movement, Michael swept the cards together and put them back in his pocket. "Too bad then. Don't expect any mercy from us at school either, sucker." And giving Douglas a punch on the arm, said, "Let's go, Dougie." Douglas leered at Jimmy as they swaggered out of the shop. Ben exchanged a mute look with the boy and followed the others back out into the afternoon sunlight. As they walked to the bus terminus, Douglas took the Jaffas from his pocket and shared them out almost equally. He gave 6 of them to Ben, who took them without a word and closed his fingers around them. The bus was already at the platform, and they ran to get on board, paid their fares, and walked down to the back seat. All the way home, Douglas and Michael talked about High Noon and other westerns they had seen. Ben sat in silence, and after opening his fingers just enough to remove a tiny thread of lint from Douglas's pocket, he kept his hand tightly shut. "I reckon that's the best movie I've ever seen," announced Michael. "Yeah, except for the woman," stated Douglas. "I reckon they spoiled it, apart from that Mexican Sheila. Yeah, she wasn't as soppy as the one he married. And anyway, she wouldn't have known how to fire a gun. Yeah, but I reckon Gary Cooper wouldn't really get married to someone soppy. He really wanted to marry the Mexican woman, I reckon. Hey, that was a good fight, eh? When he beat up that soft guy. Did you notice his squidgy little eyes? I reckon that cowboy'd be as soft as Jimmy in real life, eh? But Gary Cooper is Marshall Kane. Yeah, he's a bonzer guy, except that Mum likes him. A woman gets sappy over guys like that. I like the bad guys. I reckon Frank Miller must have been shot in the face with a shotgun. He's got scars like little holes all over his face. They're not from a shotgun, they're pockmarks, exclaimed Michael, laughing. What? From a potgun? Michael fell about laughing, fit to burst. Well, anyway, I'd love to play the bad guy in a movie, you know, and have a black beard and look real mean. Douglas screwed up his eyes and twisted his face into a grimace. Michael laughed. You'd have to dye your hair and whiskers. You can't have ginger hair and black whiskers. You don't need whiskers to be bad, thought Ben. You're bad already. He thought of Jimmy. He wondered if they knew how many Jaffas were in a box full. They must know, he thought, because they knew how much to charge for them. They didn't just scoop them out of a jar. They were for a penny. He knew that, and he could have paid for them. He still had a shilling's worth of change in his pocket, a 6pence and 2 pennies from his pocket money, and a threepenny bit his grandmother had quietly slipped him for running to the shops for her, and 2 halfpennies. He could have paid for them. He felt like a thief. He was as good as a thief. He remembered Dougie and Michael talking about a boy at school whose father was in jail. Not for actually stealing, but for receiving stolen goods. He had got them from a wharfie. Now he had received stolen goods, and he was frightened. Surreptitiously he opened his fingers just enough to reveal the stolen goods. Some of the bright orange colour was beginning to come off in his hand. Caught red-handed! Caught red-handed! He felt himself first grow hot, then cold, as the awfulness of his part in the crime swept over him. Didn't Michael care? Ben felt a revulsion for Dougie for what he had done, and for dragging them into it. He didn't think Michael would have done it. No, Michael had wanted to trade cards for bullseyes. He wouldn't have stolen anything. Now Ben began to feel resentment for Jimmy for refusing to trade, and he despised him for being such a sissy. The boys were still discussing cowboy movies in general. Hey, remember that guy who jumped through the saloon window and landed right in the saddle of his horse? Yeah, but Mum said that's not real glass. It's made of toffee. Heck, is it? Well, if I was that guy, I reckon I'd tell my nag to wait while I ate the window. Ben could not share in the laughter. He was too miserable. The journey home took half an hour. There were landmarks Ben recognised all the way when he managed to see out of a window. But even the grim black jail with its battlements and the shop with the model aeroplanes in its window failed to excite him. He was quiet and unhappy. As the bus passed the local pub and was approaching their school field, Michael jumped forward and reached for the cord to ring the bell, and he and Douglas jostled each other to the door. They all jumped down from the steps of the bus into the long grass at the side of the road, calling their thanks to the driver as they had been taught to do so. When the bus had gone, they crossed the main road. Michael told Ben to go home. He was going to Dougie's place for a while, and without giving Ben another thought, the boys headed off along the road in the same direction the bus had taken, leaving Ben to make his way up their road alone. It wasn't far, only 100 yards or so up the hill. As they set off in different directions, Ben heard the sound of another bus changing gear as it approached from the bridge on its way to town, and he made a sudden decision to do something he had never in his life done before. He went to the stop on the main road, taking the sixpence from his pocket, and waited for the bus to pull up. Somehow the steps seemed higher than he remembered them to be, and as he looked up at the burly figure of the bus driver, he was surprised to hear himself saying, "City, please," as he handed over his coin. With a quick lick of his finger, the driver tore a ticket from the wad in his cash box and handed it to the small boy without a comment. Ben almost fell into his seat as the bus started, and he noticed there were few passengers on board. He sunk so far down into the leather seat that he could not see over the seat in front, and could scarcely see out of the window. But that didn't really matter. He was going all the way to town, and once there, he would get off at the terminus. Not many people caught the bus at this hour, and the driver was very quick. Ben vaguely understood that drivers liked to get to town early so they could have a cup of tea before coming out again, and he was glad it was going to be a quick trip. He had determined on a course of action, and his mind was frozen into a state of unthinking, robot-like decisiveness. When they arrived in town, there were a lot of people either queuing for buses or moving towards their various bus stops, some hurrying, some strolling, some rushing. As he weaved and ducked his way between them, Ben felt small, now being alone, without the intermediate height of his brother that usually served to lessen his awareness of the difference in height between himself and adults. Leaving the terminus, he stood poised on the curb, waiting to cross the road. And now the familiar buildings seemed to loom over him, casting long shadows from the late afternoon sun. The narrow lane he took to get to the main street was cold and bereft of any sunlight at all. He hurried, anxious now to reach the dairy before it closed for the day. Emerging from the lane, he could see the dairy still open, and Jimmy's father sweeping dust from the doorway onto the footpath, his white shirt sleeves rolled back, and his apron flapping about his legs with brisk movements. He had gone back inside when Ben arrived at the shop, and was behind the counter with the till open. Without turning, he growled at Ben. "Shop's shutting. If you're buying something, be quick about it." He was not simply brusque, but quite unpleasant. Ben looked up at the coarse, ruddy features of the man as he stood impatiently at the till. At first, Ben tried to speak, but found his throat was so dry he couldn't make himself audible. He held up his hand, and his stiff fingers opened slowly to reveal the smudged orange mess surrounding 6 pale white balls in his palm. I've come to pay for these." His voice was little more than a hoarse whisper as he took a penny and a halfpenny from his pants pocket and held them out to the man. I forgot to pay for them." And with that, he felt the colour rush to his face and tears glaze his eyes. There was silence, such a long silence, as the shopkeeper stared at him with a look of unbelief that gradually turned to disdain. Then, with a contemptuous smirk, he plucked the coins from the boy's hand and tossed the money into the open till. Ben turned slowly away, and only then noticed Jimmy staring at him from one end of the shop, a look of fear in his eyes. As he stepped out into the cool shadows of the setting sun, Ben heard a violent outburst of abuse from within the shop, the sound of thrashing and loud whimpering protests from the boy. The awful realization came to him then of why Jimmy was the way he was, and that he, Ben, was now the cause of more suffering for this unhappy boy. Whatever relief he may have felt as a result of his belated honesty now evaporated into a cloud of miserable guilt, and as he recrossed the street, A new, terrible thought struck him. In paying for the Jaffas, he had completely forgotten his bus fare home. This was such a shock. He felt a sudden, desperate need to relieve himself. He knew of a service lane his parents sometimes used as a shortcut to the bus terminus, and he sought it out, the need to deal with this necessity now taking precedence over everything else. He found the lane, a thoroughfare in shadow even during daylight hours, and went in as far as he deemed it necessary to be hidden from public view. There was a ragged collection of galvanized rubbish cans lined up near some concrete steps in front of a closed painted door. He went behind these and relieved himself into the mossy, dirty drain that lay along the foot of the old brick wall, below a bricked-up window. From the clattering sounds behind the door, he guessed it may have been the back of a restaurant. Apart from the indistinct voices and clattering from inside the building, everything else was hushed. The sounds of passing traffic made distant by the insulating effect of the close buildings on either side of him. Choosing not to continue through the darkened lane, Ben made his way to the fading sunlight of the street and headed once more for the bus terminus, not quite knowing how he was going to get home. Not far from the terminus, there was a bookshop where his mother always stopped to buy comics and magazines, and although the bookseller himself was an uncouth man whose speech was generally a string of expletives, perhaps his mild-mannered wife, who was a friend of his mother, would lend him a penny halfpenny. But the shop was shut, and it seemed that the owners had gone home. Ben turned away and considered his predicament. When he reached the terminus, he glanced at the clock hanging above the platform and saw to his alarm that the minute hand had just flicked forward past the hour, and at the far end of the platform, his bus was leaving. He broke into a run, shouting, "Stop! Wait!" But the bus was already out on the street. The traffic lights were red, and he kept running, hoping to catch up with the bus. But even as it approached the lights, they turned green, and the bus kept going, accelerating away. Now he had a long wait for the next bus, at least half an hour, and it was late and getting cold, and his despondency made him want to cry. Returning to where the next bus would leave from, Ben dumped himself down at the end of a bench. He could not even buy popcorn from the wonderful machine that let you see it tip the kernels and pop the corn after you had put your coins in the slot. He opened his hand to reveal the Jaffas, and getting up, he walked to the nearest rubbish bin and threw them into it. Afraid to go to the washroom unless another bus arrived, he spat with disgust into his palm and rubbed the orange colour onto his shorts. Now he felt angry and stupid and wondered if his scruples had been ridiculous. When the next bus arrived at the platform, he climbed aboard and held out his 4-pence halfpenny. "How far will this get me, please?" He tried to sound confident, but his voice faltered. The driver scowled at him. "Well, that's not going to get you home, is it?" he demanded. "I know where you get off." He ripped off a 6-penny ticket and held it out to Ben. Ben flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, I haven't got any more," he said. "I'll get off early if you tell me where." "Like hell you will," retorted the driver. "Take your ticket and sit down. Bloody kids," he remarked as he took the next fare. By the time the bus reached his stop, the evening had darkened into night. As Ben stood ready to get off, the driver glanced over his shoulder and said gruffly, "Now, you get home quickly, son." Ben thanked him, climbed down, crossed the road behind the bus, and started up the hill. He was halfway up the road when he realized that the bus had not yet started up again, even though he had been the only passenger to alight, and there was no one waiting to board. He looked back, wondering why it hadn't moved, and saw what looked like the faces of all the passengers, and the driver too, staring out of the lighted bus, watching him. He then realized with an overwhelming sense of humility that they were all, in a strange way, seeing him safely home. So he turned and ran as fast as he could to where a street lamp lit the entrance to his driveway. There he gave them a self-conscious wave before he raced up his dark driveway, hearing the motor of the bus come to life again as the passengers resumed their journey home. Another wall of faces greeted him as he entered his lighted house to find his mother, the local policeman, and all his brothers and sisters and Douglas staring at him. "Where have you been?" cried his mother. "We've been worried sick. Your father's out looking for you." One look at Michael and Douglas warned him that he had better not say anything that might suggest that they were responsible for his disappearance. He opened his hand and stared at his empty palm for a moment, as if he could still see those smudgy white balls and the orange stain. I accidentally took some Jeffers, from Jimmy's shop," he whispered, "and I went back to pay for them." No one spoke, but a collective sigh of relief and exasperation dissolved the tension in the room. The policeman left, hiding a wry smile from the family as he stepped outside and rode away on his bicycle. Douglas went home, and his father returned, wearied by his anxious search, and they rang his grandmother. "I should beat you," remarked his father in a pleasantly conversational manner, "but I'm too tired." Ben became something of a celebrity with his family that night. Michael invited him to choose any cards he wanted from his collection of swaps, and after scrutinizing them all very carefully, Ben selected the least dogged of the Lancaster Bomber, the Wellington Bomber, the Messerschmitt, and for good measure, a Stuka and a Hurricane. He knew Jimmy would like those. The next morning, Douglas rang up and asked to speak to Ben. "Meet me at the fence at high noon," he growled. "What time is that?" asked Ben innocently. "Now will do," Douglas replied with impatience. Ben looked at the time on the wall. It was 10 o'clock. "I'll be there in a tick," he said cautiously. Would Dougie dare to beat him up? He hadn't told anyone the truth of the matter. He decided that if he stayed on his side of the fence, he could run away from Douglas if necessary. Douglas was waiting at the fence, scowling. "Have you told anyone?" he demanded. "Not yet," replied Ben. "What if I do?" "I'll kill you. Or better still, I'll beat you up so badly that you'll wish I'd killed you." "And what if I don't?" Douglas was so desperate, Ben knew that he had some bargaining power. "Here's a shilling." Douglas jabbed the coin towards Ben's nose. "That's a fortune. You can have it if you promise not to tell. Ever." "Cross my heart and wish to die," Ben said happily and took the shilling. Now he could buy some candy for Jimmy to say sorry, as well as giving him the cards. He could really make up for getting him into trouble. But could he ever be his friend? Ben couldn't wait for school to start again on Monday. He felt good. He felt 6 feet tall. He felt like Gary Cooper.
Thanks for listening to Emerging Aotearoa. The next episode will be released in 2 weeks' time. Make sure to subscribe to our show in your podcatcher of choice to find out why hope lies north. And stick around after the credits for Journey People Reprise from
Teddy Adams.
Responsibility was written and performed by
Ravi Prasad.
And here he is, to give you a little information about himself.
Who is Ravi Prasad? Great question. I mean, after 27 years, you would think that I would have figured it out by now, but I'll let you know once I know the answer. No, all jokes aside, I'm Fijian Indian and really passionate about all things film and TV shows, especially the superhero kind, and have been doing spoken word poetry for about 9 years now.
The Littlest Hero was written by...
Hi, I'm Flis Bridle, née Holloway. Draftswoman, illustrator, orchard worker, atheist, and one-time writer of short stories. Worked for Oxford Aunts and country cousins in England and Trees for Life in Scotland. Still a tomboy at 80, preferring outdoor work, but a capable cook and seamstress. A lifetime of reading from Bridle to Tolstoy. Mother of 5 talented kids and 11 wonderful grandchildren. Hope to have another 20 years in which to write a New Zealand novel and my memoirs, and relearn the guitar.
Emerging Aotearoa is a collaborative creatives Aotearoa production. All work is licensed under a Creative Commons International Non-Derivative 4.0 Share-alike license. Please share it, but don't modify it or sell it. If you would like to collaborate with us or submit your poetry, short stories or music, please contact us by emailing emergingaotearoa@gmail.com. Or you can send us a message through our Facebook page, Emerging Aotearoa, or Instagram, Emerging Aotearoa Pod. We are now taking submissions for Season 2, launching early 2022, the theme being Perspectives. Now for the shameless self-promotion. We'd love to have your feedback. Letting us know what you thought of our show by leaving a review on your platform of choice or through Facebook helps other people know what to expect and lets us build a better show for you. And please, if you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing it with your friends to help get the word out. While we're starting out, this truly is the greatest support you can show. The second greatest support you could show is to support us on Patreon. For as little as a coffee a month, it would make all the difference. Next week will be our Collaborators Roundtable episode, where the people involved in the making of this episode chat about the ideas behind the art, their creative processes and experiences. We welcome questions from listeners, so let us know if you have any. To see our show out, we have the original song written and performed by the talented Teddy Adams. Thank you for listening, and enjoy Journey People Reprise.
Hi, I'm Teddy Adams. My greatest inspirations of music are Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin. At 15, I learned classic guitar and later other instruments, playing in a few bands from the 90s and onwards. This year, I've been writing and recording my own music, including this instrumental called Journey People Reprise, taken from the lyrical song The Journey People. I hope you enjoy this, and I welcome you to friend request me to chat and hear more songs. Thanks.